Sorry, I had a little glitch there, you guys, with the tech. Nice to see you all. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's ECM. It's the 12th of December, 2024, and it's a Thursday, which means tomorrow is Friday the 13th. Not that we need any more bad juju in this particular timeline. Welcome. All right, we got to talk about what's going on with Chris Wray, because there's a bunch of philosophy right now about what this is actually all about. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on all of this, I think, but we have to talk about that. And we have a lot of questions about other things that are making the news this morning. And I just have to tell you all, like, humor is my coping strategy right now. So if I laugh through a lot of this broadcast, it's better than crying. Okay. All right. First things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a cream colored cowl neck sweater. My hair is down. I am a pink skinned, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman. I am in front of my bookshelf and my cushy chair, and I'm in my office, and I'm coming to you as always from occupied, unceded, Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Okay, so yesterday Chris Wray announced that he was resigning as the director of the FBI. Many of you may know that the FBI director is ordinarily a 10-year position, meaning that the director of the FBI stays in office when presidential terms flip over, sometimes more than once. And the reason behind that historically has been that there was a desire to not have the FBI artificially influenced by whoever was president. Now, we know that Trump fired Jim Comey in his first term. And that at the time, if you all will remember, was considered quite horrifying. And there was a lot of shock around it because it was not something that was normal. And he fired Jim Comey when, like, he was literally on a plane coming back to Washington, D.C. from an event on the West Coast. And obviously Trump had planned to fire Chris Wray. So in that sense, there wasn't really any suspicion that Wray was going to last terribly long. But on the other hand, had Wray decided not to resign, there would have at least been some kind of a battle set up about how and when and all that sort of stuff. And it also could have scored some political points. So the initial reaction that a lot of people had, myself included, was that it sucked and that actually it looked very much like capitulation in advance. That said, Asha Rangappa, who you all know or you should know, used to be an FBI agent, now works at Yale Law School, made an interesting statement last night that she doesn't blame Chris Wray personally because he really has been under an enormous amount of scrutiny and really kind of persecuted by people who decided that the FBI had been weaponized against Donald Trump because the FBI was involved in going into Mar-a-Lago because Donald Trump stole classified material. There's a personal element to it. Personally, my reaction was he should have stayed and fought, or stayed and at least made it happen, right? That said, David French wrote an interesting piece yesterday. It was very short, but an interesting piece in the New York Times that raised the prospect that maybe what was happening was that Chris Wray was timing this to avoid a vacancy appointment during a window of time that would have been one where Trump could have put in somebody who was unqualified. So here's the legal background behind that. There's this thing called the Vacancy Reform Act. And what it says is that if a position such as that is a congressionally confirmed position, like the director of the FBI, becomes vacant, you cannot just put some rando, this is like really not legalese on my part today, but you really can't just put some rando into the position as acting director. What you have to do instead, until the position is filled by congressional confirmation, is put in someone who has worked at least 90 days inside the agency where the appointment has arisen within the last year. And it can't be somebody who essentially has like no experience in the arena and has not been confirmed themselves. All right. So Kash Patel is none of those things. And the benefit of this resignation at this moment is that it means that the deputy director of the FBI, who is someone who's been around for a very long time, Paula Bate, will step into the role of acting FBI director while we wait to see whether or not Kash Patel can survive confirmation. And that in and of itself is maybe a little bit of interesting strategy that informs the decision-making. But I'm just going to say this. I think that, like, in large part, none of this is ideal, right? the ideal situation would be having a president who said, of course, I'm going to let the FBI director serve out his 10-year term. Now, we all know we're not going to get that from Donald Trump because he's on a revenge tour. But I would have preferred, even with all the criticism that people have raised about Chris Wray, to have stuck with the Democratic norm, right? Just like for however much I despised what Jim Comey did to Hillary Clinton, at the time that he was fired, it was quite horrifying, actually, because the idea that you would, use a potential bias to simply fire the head of the largest investigative arm of our government raises questions about their ability to be, the future ability of the agency or the department to be impartial. So again, it's not ideal. And at the same time, I suppose that if this is what's going on, and this was all speculation on David French's part, but if this is what's going on, then at the bare minimum, what Chris Wray has done is set up a situation where Kash Patel really does have to be confirmed if he's going to serve as the FBI director. And I think that's a very big if, frankly. So again, we shall see. And I will remind you all that every day right now is a good day to call your House of Representatives member and your senators and give them a piece of your mind about these nominations. The House doesn't vote on them, but every bit of influence matters. And raising your voice and using it to exert pressure is really important right now. Okay, we had a question this morning on the Patreon feed. Reminder, if you want to ask me questions and have me answer them on the air, you can become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. We had a question this morning about the future of the Supreme Court. So someone asked, do I think that Alito and Thomas will resign during Trump's second term so that he can fill those positions with ideologues? And the answer to that, I think, is a pretty serious yes. I think that it is of grave concern. This is one reason why so many of us were pushing for Supreme Court reform for the last 4 years. Because if we had an expanded court, we wouldn't be facing this down. If Alito and Thomas resign, Trump is going to nominate people who are like in their 30s, maybe in their 40s, to these currently lifetime appointments on the Supreme Court. And that will essentially lock in this extreme far-right majority for at least another 10 or 20 years. And that's one of the consequences of elections. So it's very disturbing to consider. But yes, I do think there's a real possibility that that's coming down the pike. And I will tell you one other thing. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a long window of time that anybody's going to wait for that to happen. I mean, Thomas and Alito were both in their 70s. And we all know Clarence Thomas would much prefer to be raking in the Federalist Society donor money and driving around in his paid for RV. So, I wouldn't be shocked if we see them step down, within a few months of Trump taking office. Okay. Zuckerberg. Oh, you guys, speaking of capitulation in advance, every day these days, I have this moment where I just think about, oligarchy and what oligarchy looks like. For those of you who haven't read Ruth Ben-Ghiat, by the way, one of the things that she talks about, George Conway actually raised this morning on Blue Sky, and I had forgotten about this from her book, but it's really a very valid point, which is that while the fascism itself is really, really scary, and the prospect of the harm that will be done to human lives is what terrifies most of us, it's the corruption that is like the most galling at the start. And one of the things about the way in which this is all unfolding and the kind of incestuous nature of the way the oligarchs are propping up Trump, it's just, I don't know it's stomach churning. That's probably the best way to describe it. So if you missed it, Zuckerberg has donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund. That means it's very likely, of course, that he will be at the inauguration. And I just have to remind everyone, I know I've been talking about this a lot lately, but I think that one of the things you really do have to consider, that all of us have to consider, is like, where are we going to be on social media come January 20th, right? Like, where do you want your content, your data, your family photos, if you do that sort of thing? I haven't put any family photos on the internet in 10 years. Your communications through DM. Do you want that to be done on a platform that is run by somebody who is in the pocket of Donald Trump? And I think I kind of know the answer to that. I don't know that I'm going to shut Threads down entirely, although I'm considering it. I mean, I'll be really honest. I think it's time to kind of give really serious thought to where you're willing to expose yourself, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I don't mean that like physically, but I mean, expose yourself, make yourself vulnerable to like data manipulation, farming, propaganda, disinformation, the repression of voices that you want to hear, the amplification of voices that you don't, and the potential that anything that you say could be reported to Donald Trump's law enforcement. So I would just think about all that very carefully, because the lay of the land could not be more clear, right? Lines are being drawn in the sand by things like this every day right now. And it's really critical that we make choices that are for our own safety and the benefit of the people that we love. And also so that the information that we're getting is not manipulated. That's one of the things I really like about Blue Sky, is like there's no algorithm deciding what you should and shouldn't see. And so, I would encourage you all, if you intend to stay on any form of social media. I know there's some people in the community. Somebody on Patreon this morning said they just like deleted everything and they feel better, and that's fine. But I'm going to plan on making a home on Blue Sky for the foreseeable future. And, I'd encourage you to get over there. The other thing I like about it is they have these mass block lists for MAGA, where like literally you just like subscribe to the entire list. And anytime somebody who's MAGA is added to it, they're automatically blocked from your account. And you can literally like mass block people in one click. And the safety provisions there are very strict. And there's like really a culture of blocking there. So that's just something to consider. Okay. This morning, Biden commuted the sentences of 1,500 people and pardoned 38 more. This is a very good step in the right direction, frankly. You all know, because I've mentioned this here before, that I'm very much in favor of clearing the row, which is the lingo that's being used right now for commuting every single death penalty sentence in the United States down to life in prison without possibility of parole. That would be a really good thing, given the fact that we know there are innocent people on death row and people who need time to pursue appeals, and where new evidence is being developed every day that they're not guilty. I would really like to see President Biden do that. And I think it would be a cap on his administration that would be one for the history books. I would really like to see it. But this was a step in the right direction, and it's important that nobody miss it. He also gave a really good speech yesterday at the Brookings Institution, which is a left-leaning think tank in DC. I have friends who used to work there. And the speech was about the economy and the economic comeback, essentially, that he's managed to accomplish under his term. Nobody carried it. But it was a very important speech in its own way, because it did actually mark the accomplishments of his administration that unfortunately have been like whitewashed over by so much propaganda and disinformation. So, Laura, that's fantastic. See, somebody in the comments had their student loans forgiven yesterday. My student loans were forgiven by Joe Biden. Huge, right? Huge. So I'm all in favor of that. Congratulations. It's a huge weight off. I know that feeling very, very well. So I just want to remind everybody that while, there certainly have been things that Biden has done that haven't been perfect, and certainly things that he's done that I have disagreed with, as many know, there at the same time, the economic benefit to the country coming out of COVID that he managed to accomplish is nothing short of incredible. And I think we have to look at that and be, very honest about, the fact that he came in and did something that was more or less miraculous. So that's that. Okay. We had a question about John Fetterman and what's going on with John Fetterman, who now is kind of pushing for a pardon of Donald Trump. Those of you who have been with me for a very long time know that I was very deep in Malcolm Kenyatta's campaign for U.S. Senate. And I really hate having to say, I told you so. I hate having to have those moments where I'm like, yeah, John Fetterman pulled a gun when he was mayor of Braddock on a random black jogger because he heard fireworks in his neighborhood and thought that somebody was shooting off a gun, and never apologized for it. Not even in the debate that he showed up to with Malcolm, where Malcolm held his feet to the fire. It's not like people weren't warning everyone that there was something about this fellow that wasn't quite right. And we could have had Malcolm Kenyatta as the first out black gay male senator in the United States Senate, if people had just simply been willing to vote for somebody who wasn't like perceived as a white populist. And where have we seen that before? So Fetterman is not showing himself to be who some thought he was, and that's very disappointing. And I hesitate to say this, but he really is framing himself out right now to be the next Joe Manchin. I hate that. So I don't know what to say about it beyond that. My sense about it is that we need to be very cautious when people raise alarm about potential future candidates, particularly when Black folks are raising alarm about potential future candidates, and think clearly about why one person seems appealing as opposed to another, because it might be white supremacy doing its thing. And I'm sorry to see it. I'm really just like, frankly, quite sorry to see it, because Malcolm ran a great campaign and he would have been an amazing senator. So that's that. Okay, there was some breaking news this morning that Trump has apparently invited Xi Jinping. You guys, I'm sorry. Like I warned you at the beginning that humor is really like my coping mechanism right now, and it truly is. Like I find myself at certain moments during the day when like news breaks, just like literally cracking up at my desk about how insane how absurd it is. I said this morning on Blue Sky that I find myself sometimes feeling like we're just living in a really bad farce, like a play where all the actors suck and everything itself is farcical and it's there's no escaping it. It's I don't know, man. I like Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves, for those of you who don't know, are doing a version of Waiting for Godot that's going to be on Broadway, I think, next fall. And I just kind of think the timing of it could not be better. Like, it's just, I don't know. It feels that our whole moment right now feels very much to me like the way I felt every single time I've seen a production of Waiting for Godot, and where nothing makes sense and you're waiting for something and it never comes. And so this is one of those moments. So apparently Donald Trump has invited Xi Jinping to the inauguration. It's been more than a century, and he's invited our other foreign leaders that have yet not been identified. It's been more than a century since foreign leaders have been invited to the United States inaugural. Why? Because the president is not a king. This is not the moment where we do things like, military parades or, bowing down to the future leader of a nation. We don't invite people to come sit and watch an inauguration to praise the person who's being inaugurated. And so we'll see whether or not this one actually comes to pass. Like anything else, I've been warning you guys about this. They're doing everything imaginable right now, Gish Gallop all the way, to horrify and shock us and terrify us and all that other stuff. And you have to kind of like give everything that is said versus what's taking place a demarcation, because if you get outraged about everything that's said, you're not going to have any adrenal glands left by the time you get to January 20th. So I don't know whether or not this is going to come to pass. But I will tell you all that, as with everything else, there's a little bit a lot of crazy going on right now in relation to all of this. Okay. Final point for today is a very important one. This morning, Greg Pak, who's an activist and an organizer who I follow very closely, said something that I agreed with wholeheartedly. And it's something that I need to just reiterate here, because there is some of this kind of thing happening on the Patreon feed. And every once in a while, there's something that comes through on the comments here on YouTube that raises my hackles about this. And it's this thing of saying we're doomed, right? We're doomed. It's all over. America had a good run. Those type of comments. All right. Because one of the things, and I know that some of this may be laden with sarcasm and gallows humor, and people may not actually mean it, but one of the things that I really want to say about this is that when you say things like that, you are signaling to others, including others who maybe are not politically involved, like most of this audience is, maybe don't have any access to a community of organizers or don't know how to be a community organizer. You're telling them that it's hopeless. And one of the things that I think we really need to remember here is that it's actually not hopeless. There's still 74 plus million people in this country who voted for Kamala Harris, and mobilizing even a small fraction of that will change the trajectory of what's to come under Trump the sequel. I personally have gotten really sick of it. I will just tell you that, like, when I see that sort of thing on Blue Sky, it's pretty much an automatic block now, because I just don't have the patience for it anymore. And also, it's kind of a version of nihilism, right? We've talked about nihilism here before on the broadcast. And what happens with nihilism is everybody dies. And if where we move to is a place of saying it's really bad, but I'm going to do what I can, that's a way more optimistic place than we're all doomed. I guess I better do nothing and just wait to die, right? Which is essentially what's being signaled when you say we're all doomed. And so one of the things that I just want to encourage people to do here, because, there was something else that I can't remember who said it this morning. I was like waking up this morning and reading some of the things that had kind of come through overnight. And one of the things that came through was an article, I believe, that said something along the lines of, we don't save democracy by preserving democracy. We save democracy by saving people. And that really is where it's at. You know, this is one reason why I've been so focused on dual power. And you all know we have this program, the Dual Power Accelerator, that's happening right now. Lots of you are in it, but we're also going to rerun it again in the spring. There's going to be an announcement about the timing of that. We'll open a pre-list soon. But I want people to kind of understand something about this, right? The work of saving democracy is, yes, standing on institutions, but it's also this thing of recognizing that no one's coming to save us. And given what they're signaling now, like Trump made a statement yesterday that they're going to, there's been this longstanding prohibition that ICE will not go into schools, hospitals, or churches. And Trump, again, trial balloon yesterday, said, we're going to give ICE permission to go in wherever they want. And I immediately thought to myself, what's that going to look like for kids in school? Where ICE is going to come into school and take some kids away, right? What's it going to look like to be sitting in a church service and have jackbooted thugs coming in demanding to see people's papers, or a synagogue, right? Or, obviously they're going to be targeting churches that cater to the Latino community. What's that going to look like, right? What's it going to look like to have people going to a hospital to seek emergency medical care and being under threat of being deported if they do that? Maybe if they're dying or hurt, right? So one of the things we have to remember here is that we have to build communities of safety. And all is not lost and all is not doomed if we set out to save people where we can, right? If we set out to allow ourselves to receive help when we need it. One of the things that's really critical right now is that rather than engaging in this doomsaying thing of it's all over, we're not even going to have elections in 2 years, which by the way is bullshit. We are going to have elections in 2 years and they're still going to be meaningful. And we may be able to take back the House. So sit tight, and maybe the Senate. That's one of the things I want you all to keep thinking about is we're less than 2 years now from the potential shift of power on the Hill. One of the things that I need people to focus on right now is that you will feel better if you get involved in doing something where you live to benefit people who are marginalized and vulnerable. And if you happen to be one of those people, by getting in community with others who care about you and love you and want you to be safe, right? One of the things that I just desperately want people to claim right now, well, Jean just beat me to it. This happens very often with Jean Schaap. Hi, Jean, is purpose. This was the word that I was thinking about this morning. What is your purpose right now in the face of this, right? What is your purpose when you think about what you want to do in your own community? Okay. Maybe your purpose is building safety for yourself and people that you love. Maybe your purpose is making sure that more people don't end up unhoused. More people don't end up starving. Maybe your purpose is to figure out how you're going to disrupt and intervene if an ICE raid descends on your community, right? But find your purpose, because that purpose is the thing that is going to string together the space between despair and change. Okay. And we all need to find a way to actually walk that right now. Okay, because despair is the easy way out. I'm sorry, but I got to call some of you out on this. Sitting in a place of despair nonstop is easy. It's easy. Doing the work of actually creating safety and creating change and saving people's lives is hard. It's not that hard. It's a lot easier than people think it is, right? It's really about building a small community of people who give a shit about each other, right? Who are willing to cook meals for one another and keep an eye on their neighbors and make sure that people are safe. Right? And have a plan for disruption if and when it comes to that. That's really what it's all about. It's not that tough, right? I mean, we can train you how to do it, but for a lot of you, there's organizations where you live already that are doing some form of this. Here where I live, there's an incredibly robust mutual aid community that was built up out of COVID that is still to this day saving people's lives in my neighborhood. There are ways to get involved in this kind of stuff that will loop you in to something bigger than yourself. And that's what we all really need right now. That's really what we all really need. You don't have to cook. People in the comments are funny today. No, you don't have to cook, but you could, for instance, donate money to your food pantry and volunteer there, right? You could make sure that, you got an eye on your neighbor who's elderly, who maybe doesn't have a lot of money. You could make sure that you're organized with a small group of people that you trust and you're talking about what could be potentially coming, or you're getting involved in a justice-based community, like, for instance, a Unitarian Universalist church, even if you're not churchy. God knows I'm not. One of the things that was a pun, but nonetheless, making a commitment to get involved and do something is actually a way to not just save other people right now, but save yourself. So I really want to see people move away from that. And I'm going to say one other thing here, which Greg Pak also said this morning, because it's worth saying. I mean, I thought about whether or not to repeat this, but it's really worth saying. Okay. If you're listening to commentators on social media or on YouTube who are not giving you practical action steps right now, like what I just did, like what I do every day here, on how to organize and push back against this, you may want to consider whether or not you're simply being outrage farmed for profit. And Greg made a really interesting point here, right? Check this for yourself. Are the people that you're listening to telling you to call your representatives and your senators on critical issues? Are they giving you practical ways to get involved? Are they supporting you and teaching you how to be a part of the solution? Are they taking critical points of fear and terror and giving you a way to manage them? Okay. Are they essentially organizing their audiences? If not, I'm going to tell you right now, you should be rethinking who you're listening to. And I'm not saying this from a place of self-interest. I'm actually saying it from a place of like what people should be doing from like a moral standpoint right now with the people who are listening to them. And it's a really critical point. And Greg is an organizer. And I think this point was really well taken. Some of you are listening to channels that are essentially just like memes that run for 10 minutes. Or you're paying attention to accounts on social media that literally are just meme culture and outrage. You know, like, who the F does Trump think he is that he's done this latest thing? That's the same thing for 25 posts a day, right? That's not helpful right now. And to me, yeah, Jess Craven is a prime example of the good stuff that I'm talking about here, right? Jess is always on there. She did this with North Carolina just the other day. I was reposting her. She's always on there giving people action points, much like what I try to do. Some of her stuff is like, related to petitions, or you can show up here. And I try to amplify that stuff too when I have the ability to do it. But she's a good example of somebody who's doing it right? And I hope I am too. The thing I worry about is the way in which like the outrage meter just keeps going up and up and up on some of these other channels with no practical means for people to resist. And just no wonder people feel like filled with doom and despair if that's all you're consuming, right? Because doom and despair and outrage is what's paying those commentators rather than like, people who are in it for the greater good. So give that all some thought. All right. And please stop saying things like we're doomed, including on the Patreon feed, because I'm a little tired of it. And also I just find it's like a cop out to me these days. Like I read things like that and I'm like, that's somebody, I understand the despair, but also that's somebody who's not willing to do the work. And the work is really necessary right now, like maybe more necessary than it's ever been. All right. That's it for today, my friends. Reminder, I am going to be off broadcasting for at least the entire week of the 23rd. And maybe for the week after. I haven't made a final decision on that yet. I am being pushed from all angles, including inside the company by my own team, to take that second week of New Year's off. You all know I'm a bit of a workaholic, in case you didn't notice. And I'm struggling a little bit with the idea of taking 2 weeks off in a row. Also in part because, being here every day is sort of in my habit, but I will think about it and I'll let you guys know about the second week shortly, but I will definitely not be here the entire week of December 23rd for the Christmas /Hanukkah /Kwanzaa holidays. And so I will, I'll let you all know about the second week shortly. I mean, honestly, I could really use it, but we'll see what happens with that. All right, my friends, I'll catch you all back here live tomorrow on Friday the 13th. I hope you all have a good, enjoyable Thursday. It's okay to laugh at some of this stuff, by the way. Like I should just say that. It's okay to find your humor even in the horror. It is a satisfactory coping mechanism to be able to laugh at like Kim Guilfoyle making terrible comments about Greek yogurt. And I'll see you all back here tomorrow, regular time. All right. Take care of yourselves, folks. Bye.